All right, so today we're going to talk about some classic sci-fi book recommendations because I've read a lot of classic sci-fi and I don't think I've ever talked about it in one space. I have broken it into subgenres so you can jump around with the timestamps down below if you're just like, I only care about this subgenre of sci-fi. I just think classics are interesting. They're fun to read when you want just some insight into where the genre has gotten to, and also sometimes the stories are just awesome. They're classics for a reason. But in no way do I say you have to read classics. It's more, you don't have to read anything. Like, I'm never going to seriously have a video where it's like top 5 books you must read. Like, maybe I'll make that a title one day, but I won't actually be serious about it. Anyways, so let's start though with the subgenre of space opera, which I still like. Take all these subgenres with a grain of salt because I'm still so bad at subgenres. Like space opera, I'm pretty sure we're in space. We travel in space, go on to different planets. My definition of space opera, okay? And the first one I have to mention is probably, it's one of the classics in space opera, at least sci-fi, and that's the Foundation trilogy. I've read the trilogy. I've not read the prequels and the sequels, like the other books that all surround it. There's a lot. But I've read Foundation, Empire, Second Foundation. I've read those 3. And I really like the first one. What I would caution to people who are new to science fiction is this is kind of the definition of dry, like deductive, introspective sci-fi. It's very much people talking to each other. There's not a lot of action. You just have scenes where people are basically talking out the problem, the political situation, and the solution is found in conversation. So it's really interesting, but it's not action-packed. And I did listen to the audiobook for the third one, and I really liked it and kind of wished I'd listened to the first 2. My favorite is the first in the series, and the other 2 add an element that I thought was a little weird. Something I wasn't expecting. I was kind of hoping it would go more from like the first story. And it's interesting also because it's generational. Like these 3 books take place over like thousands of years, hundreds of years, I don't know. You don't stick with characters, which is also a thing that's hard for it. You have a problem, there's an attempt at a solution, and then you are watching time pass by and how they solve different problems that show up, and it's not character focused. It's not even really civilization focused. It kind of is, like you're kind of focusing on this foundation. And that's the thing. This foundation was created because someone predicted that civilization would fall into another dark age and he could speed up the recovery if he made this foundation of people. And then they discover their purpose and the story kind of goes from there. It's hard to describe because it's really not about plot, and you can kind of tell that it was first published as short stories, which I also really like. And yeah, so this is a great entry in classic sci-fi, but if you're someone who is still like very much into plot-driven science fiction, I would just caution you with this one because it's just really not that plot-driven. It's very, not even character-driven, it's just very like deductive reasoning. I don't know how else to explain it. So that is one of the classic space operas, followed by, I guess, we'll talk about Dune. This one is like the space opera of space operas, although it's sci-fantasy, so it's not like a pure science fiction, but like it's inspired almost everything in modern speculative space. Not everything, but a lot of the popular stuff. And I'm sure you guys all know about Dune right now because I am publishing this video like a month or 2 before the movie is released, but this is on the planet full of sand and spice. There's political drama because this family is being moved here from their home world to take over the political situation because the emperor told them to, and they kind of know that this isn't like the emperor being like, I'm so proud of you, do this for me, like we're buds. It's kind of like, you're kind of not on my good list and this is your punishment. Good luck. It's very much like that. You've got like chosen one prophecy, big thing about like religion and its influence. It's philosophically kind of dense, but also written with a very modern language. So if you were someone like me who does like learning about a world kind of organically, it's really interesting like that. And it has a lot of political tension and drama and backstabbing that we're really used to in things like A Song of Ice and Fire. There are parts that lull for me. I've only read the first book. Don't know if I'll read the other ones, but if you want to know about reading the other ones, my friend Brittany and Evie both love it. I'll link both their channels below. I think Brittany has many videos on other Dune books. I've only read the first one. I've read it twice, though. And I like it, but there's like a pacing problem in the middle for me every time. And I think that's when it gets a little philosophically heavy and on the nose a little bit. But overall, like, it's really interesting. Definitely has stuff that's of its time. That's like a caveat for like all of these books, is like when you're reading stuff that was written in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, sometimes there are going to be uncomfortable things that show up. And for this one, there is quite a bit of like fat phobia. I go back and forth on how I feel about the characterization of the female characters. In some ways, they're very powerful and independent, especially for a book written in 1965. But in other ways, I'm just like, I don't know, like wanting more. I think it's kind of one of those things where since I was given something that was so close to being like super progressive and it wasn't quite there, but that's, again, 1965. But I like Dune, and I'm so excited for the movie. Can't wait. The next one we'll talk about is Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I have not read other books in this cycle yet. I've only read this one. And this is kind of like, in space, there's this Federation, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but they are sending an ambassador to this planet, and on this planet, people don't have assigned gender. They are usually gender neutral or agender. I think agender is probably the right word, until they decide they would like to procreate, and then they pick a gender, and it doesn't have to be the same gender each time. That's kind of how this species works on this planet. And this ambassador, who is, I believe, human, and not of this species, is coming to try and figure out if this civilization is ready to join this like galactic Federation empire thing, and political stuff ensues from there. There's like a really beautiful like love story. It's very reflective. Again, this is something that has tense moments, but I wouldn't say is action-packed. It's very much like a piece that I read and that I enjoyed, and I'm like, I need to read this again in like 20 to 30 years when I've lived more and have more like thoughts to add to this story. But it's really good. I still really want to read Ursula K. Le Guin. People have given me some good recommendations in some recent videos of mine. But again, another great classic sci-fi space opera. And then the last one I have that I'm rereading very soon, Hyperion by Dan Simmons. What to say about Hyperion? This one's also been talked about a lot in my booktube circles lately, which makes me happy. This one I read like way early in my sci-fi reading days, which I don't know if I recommend, but I did it and I was fine. But I'm really excited now that I'm more like seasoned to read it again and like catch some stuff, see some tropes that I wasn't familiar with. This is like sci-fi horror space opera a little bit. It's very unsettling at times. And in this first book, it's basically broken into short stories. You have a bunch of people gone on this pilgrimage to the Temple of the Shrike, I believe. And at the same time, there's a lot of bad stuff happening in like the big empire galaxy stuff going on. These things are happening in parallel. There's kind of like end of the universe vibes and this like pilgrimage. And you don't really understand if or why they would be connected, but they're talked about in tandem. And each pilgrim gets their own story of why they're on this pilgrimage. And each story is very unsettling and interesting. And then the series continues in really cool ways. And I don't know, I really like it. There's not much like it that I've ever read before. And there are just moments that stick with you. Everyone always remembers the priest story. That's like a thing. Like if anyone who's read it, they haven't read it in years, you mention the priest and you're like, oh, yeah, like there's just like moments like that. And like, it's awesome. I'm very excited to reread the whole Cantos. The first two, though, can be read as its own duology. You can do that. I like reading all four, but thinking of them as two parts of a whole, but they're like separate. I don't know if that makes sense. I like both duologies, but I don't like thinking of them together, even though they are together. I don't really know how to explain it. Maybe on my reread I'll have better words, but regardless, Hyperion, fantastic classic space opera. All right, now we're going to get into what I've loosely decided are classic sci-fi thrillers, and you're just going to have to bear with me because some of these maybe don't count, or maybe they do. It's hard to decide. The first one's Kindred by Octavia Butler. If you haven't read this book, people have been talking about it a lot, which makes me so happy. But like, this book is a book that if you pick it up, you don't put it down. Like, that's the book. You start off, it's one of those books that starts, like, the first chapter is the end of the story, and you're like, what? How are we here? And the story gets you there. It's also just very tense. There's so much tension. This woman in contemporary America, which the book is written in the 70s, so it's meant to be a contemporary black woman sent back into the antebellum South during times of slavery. And she keeps being drawn back to the past, and she never knows when she can be brought back to her own time. And obviously, being a contemporary black woman in slavery South, not a great time. Full of bad stuff, plus the whole mystery of, like, why is this happening to me? I read this book in like 2 days. I devoured it. Doesn't mean it's like happy, nice, fun times. It's really stressful and it's really dark and there's a lot of heavy themes, but I couldn't look away. I could not put this book down, okay? Similarly, another Octavia Butler, and I'm going to talk about this series as a whole, I think in a different section, but Clay's Ark by Octavia Butler. You can kind of read it outside of the Pattern Mastering series. Could not put it down. It was kind of like a contagion thriller story. It was a lot. So yeah, Kindred. Go pick it up. And then Jurassic Park. I feel like this is about as young as I get on this list, like 1990. But it's a classic. I feel like we can all agree Jurassic Park is a classic sci-fi. Like, I cannot imagine it not existing on that type of list. And I have read it, and it read a lot faster than I expected. I don't know why. I kind of expected it to be drier in its prose, but it was honestly, it moved at a great clip. I think it's a great pairing for the movie. Like, I think they both enhance the other. Like, there's some slight differences. And I read this in my first or second year of grad school, so as I was learning about a lot of biomedical sciences, and I was like, this isn't like too bad. Like, obviously everything takes liberties, and I do have my whole science behind the magic on Jurassic Park and how can we make dinosaurs sort of thing. And, you know, there's some things that they try and some things we've learned, you know, time marches on, everything like that. But it's a thriller. It's tense. Dinosaurs. I don't feel like I don't have to tell you guys what Jurassic Park's about. And then the last one, Ryan says this is a thriller. So if I'm wrong, this is Ryan's fault. It's Ubik by Philip K. Dick. Ubik's weird. I thought about putting this in a different category, but it is kind of thrillery. I don't know how to describe Ubik. It's like the Twilight Zone, kind of. If it was a book, you really don't know what's happening. You really don't. It's a bizarre situation. It keeps ever evolving. You never know what is reality. Like, that's the big sense from reading the story. You as the reader don't know what's real, and the people in the story don't know what's real. And that's Ubik. Like, I can't even really give you a plot synopsis. I just remember reading it and being like, that was a fun, weird time. And yeah, and it is like, I think the plot technically is a thriller plot where I think you start off with like an unexplained murder or injury. Again, that's not the important part. The important part is like, what is reality? And it's very tense because of that premise of like, I don't know. And to this moment, like, I can't remember. So now I need to go maybe either reread it or look up a plot synopsis and figure out what did happen in that story, which is why I almost put it in a different category. Now we're going to go into dystopian, which I know some people think is its own genre, which, like, I guess, but these to me are science fiction dystopians, and that's what I put them in. I honestly think of dystopian as a subgenre of sci-fi, and I'm bad at subgenres, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but that's what's happening. My video, my rules. And we'll start with 1984, which is the one that I have not read for the longest, but I remember quite vividly. I think I read this early high school days, like maybe 9th grade, and whoa. So I feel like the premise is pretty well understood, but this book was written, I believe, in the 50s or 40s, and it was predicting where we would be as a society in 1984, and it's very dystopian. Big Brother watching, government control, very little freedom. You must fit a mold. If you don't fit the mold, you will be reprogrammed, I believe. And your main character is someone who is kind of like pretty complicit, kind of just exists, but is starting to realize maybe he doesn't want to be that way. Maybe something's wrong, and watching that evolve, he meets this person who seems to be very free and doesn't fit, and that kind of triggers this path. And the story goes from there, and it's very tense, and the ending is a lot. Like, what I remember vividly is the ending, which I can't tell you guys about because it's the ending of a book. But man, it sticks with me, and I can't wait to reread it. I wanted to reread it in 2016, but then 2016 happened, and then I was just like, I'll wait. It's kind of like how there's a lot of Contagion stories I wanted to read in 2020, and I was like, you know, I'm just gonna hold off for a bit. So 1984, though, really I think holds up, especially because I was engaged by it as like a 14-year-old, which back then, like, I was definitely more plot driven, and I remember this having plot tension moments, but also being a very introspective, reflective piece. And then we have Fahrenheit 451, which is very similar in terms of like, you have this dystopian society. This one's a little different. Knowledge is burned, taken away, you know, so the only knowledge you get is from the authoritarian government thing, whatever it is. And our main character is trying to figure out his place in that. And what's the problem is that I watched the HBO movie and they're different. And so I'm conflating a lot of what happened with Michael Jordan's character and the main character, and they're not the same. But what I'll say is it's again one of those stories that has tension because it's a dystopian, but it's more reflective than what I think the visual media gives it. Like, it's very much this person figuring things out, learning secrets, or, you know, maneuvering that space, okay? So I wouldn't pick this up if you just want like an extreme page turner. It could be a page turner for you, but it wouldn't be for like the traditional reasons for a page turner, if that makes sense. And then we've got Handmaid's Tale, which I like Handmaid's Tale. I feel like people who watch my channel don't know this because my most viewed video is my Testaments Rat review, because I don't like the Testaments, which is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. But I really like The Handmaid's Tale. And it's more of a literary fiction, so I almost put it in a literary category that I have, spoiler alert, as the last category for this list. But it is dystopia. If you haven't seen a trailer for the show or anything like that, we're in the future. Something has happened. There's been like nuclear war. There's also been fertility problems. Bad things have happened to the human race. And suddenly that allowed in this vacuum for Gilead to form up, which is a very Puritan, authoritarian state. Basically, women don't have a lot of rights. Some women are conscripted into being these handmaids who are forced to procreate because these are the fertile women. So they are given to the higher ups in this society to give birth to children. It's rough. And this whole book is kind of the audio recordings of this woman who is unnamed. And it's very reflective. Feel like dystopian sci-fi, especially in its classic form, is very reflective. Like, this character is thinking to herself, getting out all these thoughts that she can never say out loud because if she speaks, she will be punished in ways. Like, they won't kill her. She's too valuable for that. But it wouldn't be great. And so her thoughts are just fascinating. This was one of the first books I ever annotated, and I just was tabbing so many sentences and thoughts. And it's a book I do want to go back and reread one day because I just thought it was very masterfully put together. My love of Handmaid's Tale is why I do not like the Testaments. Just so everyone knows, I don't like that book. But again, it's a pretty good dystopian. And then this last one, I mentioned Clay's Ark and Thriller because there's this whole Pattern Master series by Octavia Butler. And I don't know what genre this belongs in. It could be in space opera, it can be in thriller. I'm putting it in dystopian because the first book that was published is Pattern Master, and that is a dystopian book. Every other book kind of is a prequel to that book, and I'm going to one day edit and put up my Pattern Master video. I've filmed it, but I haven't edited it, and I might refilm it. I don't know. Depends on what my brain does when I look at that footage again. But it's a confusing series in terms of how you should read it. But regardless, I'm putting it in dystopian, and it's really interesting because in this far future, you have humanity evolving into like kind of two branches, and one has these telekinetic abilities and these other have more animalistic traits, and they're kind of at a head, and that's what the first published book, but the last chronological, discusses. That's the dystopian. And the other 3 books that are published, but there is a 4th that is unpublished and out of print, are basically how did we get from our world to this point? Like, what happened to evolve to this point? So if you read it from Wild Seed to Pattern Master, you don't really know that you're being led to a dystopian. But if you know about Pattern Master, you're kind of seeing these pieces fall into place. It's kind of like if you watched Alien and Aliens and then you watched Prometheus. It's kind of like that. This is why I don't know what genre to put this in, but it's a great classic series and people need to read it. So that's why it's on the list. And I promise I will film that series review one day. It'll happen. I'm manifesting it. And now this last section is my literary science fiction, which I don't really know what this means. Ryan's mad that I even made this a subgenre, and we've had discussions about this in my Discord, like what does it mean to be literary fiction? And my definition is that the story is not really plot-driven or character-driven. It's meant more to be about the words, if that makes sense. It's meant more to be about like the art of creating something, and it's, I don't know. I don't know how to define literary fiction. I just know it when I read it, and some of these could go in other categories, of course. But this is what I did, so I'm sorry if you hate this decision of mine. The first one is Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or Blade Runner. Blade Runner are the movies that are based off this story, But again, like almost everything else in classic sci-fi, movie, very action-packed. Book, not so much. Very introspective. Very day in the life of this person, very much contemplating his place in the universe. There's a lot of discussion of what makes someone a human in this story, so it's very thematically dense, and it's very, what I would call, literary. I almost put Ubik here by the same author, because again, it's just like very out there, if that makes sense. And then I have Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. Yeah, I don't know if you've read Kurt Vonnegut, but he's got he makes decisions when he writes stories, and it normally errs on the side of unconventional, if that makes sense. I don't know if I love this story, but I loved discussing this story. I have a video actually with the Codex Cantina, so I'll link that down below, where we spend like an hour discussing the themes and the things we liked and didn't like in this work. But basically, you have this person who doesn't really have control of his destiny, but thinks he does, and you kind of watch his journey, and it takes a lot of weird turns. It's a very odd book. And then the last one I could have put in dystopian, but I don't, because if I put it in dystopian, people get the wrong idea, and that's The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This one was only published in English recently, but it was actually written in 1994, so actually I think this might be the newest work on my list, but it really feels like a lot of classic works that I've read. And this is about an island where occasionally things leave the collective memory of people, and it leaves it in very abstract and tangible ways. So for example, birds leave everyone's memory and there suddenly are no more birds, but sometimes they take part in it. And it's very interesting, and it's very much a way of exploring how does one handle consistent loss and change. And it's very timely, and it has a story within the story. Our unnamed narrator is an author, and so in the book there is a story that she is also writing in tandem with the events of the island. And it's a story that, although it's been over a year since I've read it, I've talked about it in like 4 book clubs, it sticks with me. I don't know what its purpose is, but I think that's the point. It evokes conversation. And the reason why I don't put it in dystopian, although I get why American publishers do, is that this doesn't feel like 1984. It doesn't have that tension. It's a very quiet story. Yes, it's kind of terrifying what's actually happened when you're thinking about it, but it doesn't feel like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. And so when you lump it together, I just don't want to give false expectations, if that makes sense. So those are all the classic science fictions I wanted to talk about. Hopefully this list kind of made sense. I know sometimes I could give better synopses than others. I mostly just have like vibes when it comes to classic sci-fi. It's definitely something I don't read as much anymore, but I do plan on continuing more. There's a couple series that have been put on my radar by some female sci-fi authors that I'm very excited to get to. And so it's definitely something I'll do, but this has been like the collection of classic sci-fi that I've read in like the past 6 years or something like that. Let me know any classic sci-fi that you really like, that you think I would like based off these books that I've talked about. And if you want to leave an emoji, I don't know, leave a sheep emoji for Blade Runner. And like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.